hard. And it's hard to be a young boy. It's hard to be a boy going through puberty.
I was told, just read it, because I was looking for movies that could be both commercial and still speak deeply to the human experience. We always tease each other at home. After I gave birth, for example, he joked, "Oh my gosh, if I lost you and I went to the park with our 3 kids. I mean, think of the ladies," which I know sounds like a horrible thing to say, but that's the kind of humor we share. Meanwhile, outside of our family bubble, Hollywood has been buzzing with speculation. Did Blake Lively just get exposed for lying in court? Explosive new evidence in her $400 million legal showdown with Justin Baldoni threatens to flip the entire feud on its head. What began as a dream partnership on the adaptation of a best-selling novel has spiraled into a courtroom spectacle filled with accusations, leaked messages, and whispers of a hidden crisis behind the scenes. The question everyone's asking is how it collapsed so quickly, and whether the scandal could shatter Blake Lively's carefully crafted image. At home, things are a bit of an adjustment, though it's good overall. I have 2 other daughters, and while my oldest has been very loving and maternal toward the new baby, my middle child is not as enthusiastic. We joke about keeping her anyway, even though she mostly just pretends to play with the baby, clearly uncertain about her role. Still, while our household balances ordinary family dynamics, Hollywood circles trace the beginning of this saga to what seemed like a shared vision: Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni uniting to bring a beloved novel to the big screen. The book, praised for its raw emotional weight and themes of personal growth, appeared perfectly suited for Baldoni's heartfelt directorial style and Lively's undeniable star power. Fans were ecstatic when she was cast as a lead, with whispers that her husband Ryan Reynolds was quietly influencing creative choices behind the scenes. Industry insiders even suggested that Reynolds' signature blend of humor and heart was shaping the tone of the film. For a while, everything seemed hopeful and promising, with both Lively and Baldoni publicly expressing excitement about honoring the book's emotional core while making it resonate with modern audiences. Yet beneath the glossy surface, tension brewed, differing creative visions, clashing egos, and mounting. Pressure steadily transformed the collaboration into a volatile partnership, setting the stage to the drama that would soon spill out into the public eye. And now, as the story shifts from film set to courtroom, Blake insists she feels honored to be part of something so important and meaningful, grateful that so many people care enough to anticipate and discuss the project, even if the conversation is no longer about art alone, but about the chaos surrounding it. In 2019, I first encountered the book, sent to me by my agent and friend at the time, and I was searching for material that wasn't just commercially viable, but also capable of resonating on a deeply human level. Stories that could inspire, while still drawing in large audiences, the kinds of films that speak to both the heart and the box office. And that was exactly why this project seemed destined for greatness, yet what initially appeared to be a dream collaboration between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni very quickly began to unravel as sharp creative differences surfaced, laying bare the cracks in what had once seemed like an unstoppable partnership. Because Baldoni, true to his reputation, was determined to preserve the emotional integrity of the novel, shaping the adaptation with a grounded, serious tone that stayed faithful to the book's raw, painful themes of resilience, healing, and personal growth, while Lively, brimming with her own artistic vision, pushed for A, modernized interpretation infused with stylish cinematography, glamorous wardrobe choices, and lighter comedic flourishes that she felt would broaden the film's appeal to audiences far beyond the book's loyal readership. And though her vision was bold and cinematic, Baldoni increasingly saw it as a threat to the very soul of the story, believing her approach risked flattening the emotional complexity into something shallow and glossy, while Lively felt the opposite, that her voice was being dismissed, undervalued, and undermined in a way that not only frustrated her, but also stoked a growing sense of resentment. And soon the creative discussions that had once been exciting and collaborative soured into heated arguments behind closed doors, with disputes erupting over everything from character arcs and dialogue delivery to costume details and set design, transforming what should have been a passion project into an all-out battleground of clashing egos and incompatible visions. And neither of them seemed to realize at the time that the conflict brewing on set was only the beginning of a much larger war that would spill out far beyond the film itself, a war that would soon land in the public eye. shaking reputations, friendships, and the financial backbone of production. Because when Blake Lively, in interviews, hinted that her ideas were systematically dismissed and her perspective ignored, Baldoni refused to let those remarks go unanswered, instead striking back with a staggering $400 million defamation lawsuit that sent shockwaves through Hollywood, accusing Lively of deliberately misrepresenting their collaboration and painting him as dismissive in a way that not only threatened his personal reputation, but also jeopardized the entire project's financial future. And his legal team wasted no time in producing evidence they claimed proved their case. Text messages, meeting notes, behind-the-scenes correspondence, all pointing to Lively's deep involvement in creative decisions she would later publicly criticize, a contradiction Baldoni's side argued was intentional, malicious, and damaging. And though at first the case seemed to be just another classic Hollywood clash of egos, another messy collision of star power and directorial control, it quickly evolved into something far more explosive when whispers began to circulate about newly unearthed evidence, documents, and recordings rumored to contain revelations that could flip the case on its head and expose hidden truths neither side was prepared to confront, setting the stage for a scandal that had the potential not just to derail a single film, but to shatter Blake Lively's carefully polished public image and redefine Justin Baldoni's standing in an industry that thrives on perception as much as on art. According to insiders, private conversations and confidential documents had surfaced, casting serious doubt on the accuracy of Blake Lively's sworn testimony, and what had initially begun as nothing more than a heated creative dispute over tone. The disputes that had once seemed confined to wardrobe selections and character arcs had now metastasized into a sprawling, high-stakes battle over truth, integrity, and reputation itself. A battle so fraught with tension that it blurred the once clear lines between art and litigation and transformed what should have been a straightforward Hollywood adaptation into a sprawling courtroom saga that felt far larger than the film it was meant to bring to life. And while Blake Lively spoke in interviews with a calm, almost breezy confidence, describing how she wore authentic pieces from her own closet, borrowed jackets from her husband, and even raided the wardrobe of her friend Gigi to cultivate an image of relatability, accessibility, and effortless charm. The subtext of those seemingly innocent remarks only added fuel to a fire that was already consuming gossip columns, podcasts, and social media feeds across the industry, because the lawsuit had reached a shocking, unprecedented turning point when whispers of newly uncovered evidence began to ripple through Hollywood's tightly knit inner circles. Whispers so insistent that even the most jaded insiders began to take notice. And according to those claiming first-hand knowledge, a hidden trove of private emails, text messages, and behind-the-scenes conversations had surfaced, many of which allegedly contradicted Lively's sworn testimony under oath, suggesting that the carefully curated public version of events she presented to judges, juries, and journalists did not, in fact, match the private record of her creative involvement. And if the leaks were to be trusted, and insiders insisted they were, they painted a radically different picture of her role in the production, one where she wasn't reluctantly acquiescing to comedic flourishes, dramatic tonal shifts, or extravagant wardrobe choices, but was instead actively advocating for them, leaving traces of her influence on the very decisions she would later claim to have resisted. And the contradictions were particularly damning when specific exchanges surfaced, including one in which she jokingly referenced plot points that she would later argue undermined the story's emotional core, alongside other messages capturing her delight at costume designs, set details, and production adjustments that her courtroom testimony insisted she opposed. And this dissonance between the private record and the sworn word became the precise opening Justin Baldoni's legal team had been waiting for, because almost immediately they began seeding hints to the press that what had been leaked so far was only the beginning, a small taste of a far larger storm, a storm whose potential to unravel reputations, careers, and public perception seemed almost limitless, and a mere suggestion that even more explosive revelations awaited disclosure in a courtroom, in front of a judge, a jury, and an insatiable media audience, was enough to set off waves of speculation. An analysis that spread like wildfire across Twitter threads, gossip columns, late-night commentary, and industry newsletters, until suddenly, whispers of emergency meetings began circulating with a level of urgency that implied this was no longer a distant threat, but a crisis already unfolding, a crisis in which every executive, producer, stylist, and creative collaborator was now bracing for impact knowing that the fallout could touch every aspect of the film and potentially redefine public perceptions of Lively's professional integrity. And as these whispers grew louder, insiders began painting a picture not merely a legal battle, but of a high-stakes psychological chess game in which strategy, perception, and timing mattered as much as the facts themselves. A game in which every text message, every wardrobe decision, every seemingly offhand remark could be weaponized, recontextualized, and dissected in ways that would make even the most seasoned Hollywood players reconsider. Every alliance, every collaboration, and every decision made in the supposedly private corridors of power. As the storm loomed larger, it became clear that the line between personal branding and professional accountability had dissolved entirely, leaving Lively, Baldoni, and everyone connected to production caught in a relentless, swirling vortex where public opinion, legal maneuvering, and media frenzy collided with a force that threatened to consume not just the film but the very reputations of those involved, creating a narrative so intricate, so charged with contradiction that it became almost impossible to disentangle truth from perception, performance from reality. And in the midst of this unfolding spectacle, the question everyone was asking, both quietly behind closed doors and loudly across public forums, was whether any of the players would emerge unscathed, or if the legacy of this adaptation, once envisioned as a glittering Hollywood triumph, would instead collapse into a cautionary tale of how quickly ambition, ego, and miscommunication could spiral into a spectacle far beyond anyone's control. With sources close to Lively describing frantic late-night sessions inside her camp, attorneys and publicists scrambling to contain the fallout, draft carefully calibrated statements, and brace for what could prove to be a devastating blow not only to her legal position, but to the meticulously curated image she had spent years cultivating as a star who effortlessly straddled the line between glamorous and grounded, authentic yet aspirational. And as the rumors spread, the whispers grew louder, tumbling into every corner of Hollywood until they could no longer be ignored, while the media pounced with relentless ferocity, spinning the story into banner headlines, explosive push notifications, and viral social media threads that framed the case as one of the great Hollywood betrayals of the decade, with hashtags like #LivelyPanics, #HollywoodScandal, and #courtroomDrama climbing to the top of trending charts across Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, dividing audiences in real time. Because while some fans expressed outrage and disappointment, accusing Lively of prioritizing her personal branding and aesthetic above the integrity of beloved source material, others mounted fierce defenses, insisting that her vision of modernizing the adaptation was necessary to make the story resonate with contemporary audience. And the divide only intensified when leaked photos from the set surfaced, showing Lively draped in designer couture that looked as though it had been ripped straight from a runway editorial. Images that clashed starkly with the book's grounded, intimate sensibilities and made the debate about artistic fidelity versus star-driven spectacle impossible to contain, fueling think pieces and op-eds in major entertainment publications, late-night commentators dissecting every frame of leaked video, and online forums exploding with passionate analysis of whether Lively's involvement represented creative brilliance, ego-driven, overreach, or some dangerous combination of both, while insiders whispered of tense on-set confrontations, last-minute rewrites, and wardrobe choices that sparked heated debates behind closed doors, with costume designers, directors, and producers caught in a precarious balancing act, navigating between her authority as a lead and the expectations of devoted fans of the source material. And all of this pressure compounded when anonymous leaks suggested that her public statements about relatability and borrowing clothes from friends might have been carefully orchestrated to soften perceptions of her creative control, a strategy that only added another layer of intrigue and speculation, leaving the public to wonder not just what had actually happened on set, but whether the image of Blake Lively, the polished, approachable, playful star, had ever truly existed outside the carefully staged moments captured for press cycles. And as debate raged across social media, late night segments, and entertainment news specials, the conversation expanded from mere wardrobe and set design into a sprawling discourse about authenticity, power, celebrity influence, and the fragile boundary between personal branding and artistic responsibility, creating a perfect storm in which every statement, every action, and every image was scrutinized, dissected, and weaponized, turning what was meant to be a single film adaptation into a cultural touchstone, a public trial not only of one actress, but of the industry's obsession with image, perception, and control, leaving audiences, insiders, and critics alike grappling with the dizzying question of whether art could survive amidst such relentless spectacle, or whether the story of the adaptation itself had already been rewritten by the very forces meant to protect it. Central themes of financial struggle and emotional survival that many longtime readers saw it as confirmation their fears had been justified, that the adaptation had lost sight of its heart. And meanwhile, Baldoni's supporters see sold from the start, and with every new headline, every new leak, every new rumor, the stakes rose higher until what was once a promising collaboration had transformed into a Hollywood morality play about ego, art, ambition, and the dangerous thin line between truth and perception. Industry insiders whispered of frantic, late-night crisis meetings inside Blake Lively's camp as her team scrambled to contain the wildfire narrative that she had misrepresented her creative role. And every fresh rumor, every leaked text, every exclusive insider revelation seemed to push the feud further and further into the spotlight, creating an atmosphere where the stakes for both Lively and Justin Baldoni had never been higher. Because what had started as a creative clash over artistic direction and tone had spiraled into a full-blown Hollywood scandal with the power to reshape not only careers and reputations, but possibly the entire trajectory of the film itself. And with the public riveted, the media frenzy mounting by the hour, and social media feeds dominated by hashtags dissecting every leaked detail, one chilling truth became undeniable. The battle was far from over, and the next revelation, whenever it landed, could change everything in an instant, because in Hollywood, perception often matters more than fact, and once the tide of public opinion shifts, it can be almost impossible to turn back. And while this chaos raged, Baldoni remained resolute, reminding interviewers of how deeply the book had touched him, how he had been drawn to it not out of commercial opportunism, but because it spoke to the human experience, recounting through tears how he read the novel in bed next to his wife, weeping so uncontrollably that snot ran down his face, proof to him of how raw and powerful the story was and how vital it was to preserve its emotional authenticity on screen. But as the courtroom drama escalated, another unexpected twist began to emerge. Whispers of Ryan Reynolds' behind-the-scenes involvement, a development that threatened to further complicate the already volatile narrative. Because although Reynolds had never been officially attached to the project, sources claimed his voice echoed through countless creative decisions, and his reputation for blending humor with heart meant that his fingerprints were allegedly all over the tonal shifts that tilted the adaptation toward lighter, more comedic beats, shifts that aligned neatly with Lively's vision and clashed directly with Baldoni's insistence on gravity and faithfulness. And insiders suggested Reynolds had not only offered encouragement, but had quietly guided rewrites, offering lines, notes, and advice that subtly steered the project toward a direction that industry observers now considered a liability in the courtroom. Because if Baldoni's legal team could link Reynolds' influence to contested creative choices, the question would no longer just be whether Lively had misrepresented her role, but whether the entire project had been compromised by an uncredited voice, setting up a dramatic new front in a battle that already felt less like a film adaptation and more like a Shakespearean power struggle playing out under the harshest lights of Hollywood, now shone directly on a revelation that immediately raised uncomfortable and far-reaching questions across the industry and fan community alike. Questions about how much of the film's creative identity genuinely belonged to the official production team, and how much had been subtly shaped within the walls of Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' household, where casual dinner table conversations, whispered late-night brainstorming sessions, and uncredited feedback could easily bleed into professional decision-making in ways no one outside the inner circle could fully trace. And for Justin Baldoni, this possibility became yet another source of mounting frustration, because he reportedly believed that Reynolds' unseen hand had steered the adaptation away from the raw emotional intensity and stripped-down vulnerability that had made Colleen Hoover's novel beloved, smoothing over edges that were meant to cut, softening wounds that were supposed to sting. And while defenders of Lively and Reynolds were quick to argue that any input from Reynolds had been entirely well-intentioned, framed as the supportive nudges a husband trying to help his wife navigate a complex adaptation and broaden its resonance beyond Hoover's core readership, Baldoni and his supporters insisted that such interference risked fundamentally betraying the heart of the source material, diluting its authenticity in favor of glossy, commercially palatable sheen, and the debate spilled into public forums as fans took sides, flooding TikTok threads, Reddit discussions, and fan message board with criticism that the project seemed to have drifted too far from its original emotional core, while others defended Lively fiercely, praising her ambition to reinterpret the novel for a modern audience and hailing Reynolds' rumored contributions as evidence of a power couple leveraging their combined instincts to elevate the adaptation beyond its origins. Yet speculation continued to swirl because if Reynolds had indeed influenced the very creative decisions that Lively later publicly disowned in court, her sworn claims of being blindsided could be undermined entirely, potentially eroding her credibility in a way that might ripple through both the legal proceedings and her carefully cultivated public persona, while simultaneously, Baldoni's lawsuit risked appearing one-sided or opportunistic if evidence surfaced showing that multiple voices, including Lively's husband and possibly other uncredited consultants, had actively shaped the trajectory of the project, and with Reynolds unexpectedly entangled in the narrative, questions multiplied at an exponential rate. Was he merely a supportive partner offering casual advice, a behind-the-scenes creative collaborator exerting tangible influence, or a strategic force subtly guiding the adaptation's evolution while remaining publicly invisible? And if any of these scenarios proved true, it threatened feedback. Or was he in fact an invisible force whose involvement blurred the lines of accountability to such a degree that no one could be held singularly responsible for the adaptation's controversial direction? And while the gossip machine churned endlessly with these theories, the lawsuit itself grew heavier by the day, Baldoni's $400 million defamation claim towering not simply as a matter of money, but as a towering statement about reputation, integrity, and artistic authenticity. Because, from his perspective, Lively's allegations had painted him as an unreliable, dismissive filmmaker, a portrayal that not only threatened to derail his career, but also sabotaged the financial future of the project itself. And for Lively, the stakes were equally catastrophic, because if the court determined that she had misled the judge or deliberately misrepresented her role in shaping the adaptation, the fallout could deliver a permanent blow to her marketability in Hollywood, a realm where brands and studios thrive on carefully maintained images of trust, and where even a hint of dishonesty can turn future partnerships into dangerous gambles. And fueling the tension like oxygen to a flame was the ever-present threat of more evidence. Because Baldoni's legal team never stopped hinting that additional documents, text exchanges, and behind-the-scenes notes existed, some allegedly even more damning than what had already been surfaced, and whispers of late-night crisis meetings within. Lively's inner circle began to circulate with increasing intensity, with sources describing frantic strategy sessions where attorneys, publicists, and confidants scrambled to reframe the narrative, their likely defense rooted in the argument that creative projects evolve naturally, that out-of-context text messages and selective notes could never capture the full nuance of artistic collaboration, and that what appeared incriminating in isolation might, when viewed as part of a fluid process, amount to nothing more than the messy, ever-changing reality of making art in Hollywood under impossible pressures and unrelenting scrutiny. If successful, they could paint Lively not as a deceptive manipulator, but as a misunderstood artist swept into the undertow of a turbulent, high-stakes process, a woman caught in a collision of commerce and creativity where every move is magnified, every choice scrutinized, and every word twisted into headline fodder. Yet for Baldoni, each fresh leak of emails, texts, or whispered insider testimony was gasoline on the fire of his claim that his vision had been deliberately undermined, and with each revelation, supporters rallied around him as a lone voice of authenticity, the director who stood in defiance of Hollywood's glittering machinery, determined to honor Colleen Hoover's story in its rawest form while resisting the all-too-familiar tendency of studios to sand down the edges, to trade grit for glamour, to transform pain into polished spectacle, and the media, ever hungry for blood, seized on this feud with carnivorous delight, amplifying hashtags like hashtag Lively Panics and hashtag Hollywood Scandal across platforms until they echoed like chants in a stadium, and photos of Lively draped in luxurious couture, posing on red carpets, sipping champagne in gilded settings clashed violently with the novel's central themes of financial struggle and intimate vulnerability, a jarring juxtaposition that enraged fans who accused her of prioritizing image over narrative truth, of turning a story of survival into a backdrop for a brand. And these ripple effects spread far beyond the courthouse steps, seeping into boardrooms where producers and investors, once giddy with the prestige of Hoover's best-selling name, began to shift uncomfortably in their leather chairs, questioning whether the film could ever escape the suffocating shadow of its controversy, asking in hushed tones if audiences would watch it as an adaptation of a powerful novel about resilience and heartbreak, or as a Hollywood cautionary tale of ego, betrayal, and an implosion of trust between collaborators. Because in an industry where perception is currency and illusion is everything, both Lively and Baldoni knew that victory in the court of public opinion was as critical, if not more so, than any legal verdict handed down by a weary judge. And as speculation about possible outcomes mounted, three divergent paths took shape like ghosts. What should have been a triumphant debut on the silver screen for a best-selling novel adored worldwide was instead precariously hanging in the balance, overshadowed not by the quality of the script, nor by performances of the cast, but by off-screen meltdowns, legal skirmishes, and a series of behind-the-scenes miscalculations that now seemed almost inevitable in hindsight, and Colleen Hoover herself, once insulated by the fervent devotion of millions of fans, found the spotlight turning mercilessly on her every decision, her public alignment with Blake Lively being recast by many as a betrayal, a perceived stab in the back of Justin Baldoni, the director who had championed her work for years, who had nurtured her story from its earliest, fragile iterations long before it dominated bestseller lists. And as Hoover retreated into silence, avoiding interviews, refusing social media commentary, and even deleting posts that had once been celebrated for their authenticity, the void she left only magnified the divide, sparking endless speculation and debate among fans, critics, and industry insiders alike about whether she now regretted her choice or whether her silence was a deliberate, strategic maneuver designed to prevent further escalation, a choice to let the storm burn itself out rather than fanning the flames with more public statements. While behind closed doors, the murmurings in Hollywood were deafening, with agents, producers, and executives speculating not just about the fallout of a single film, but about how such a public spectacle could reshape the entire industry's approach to managing conflicts between stars, directors, and the media, for if reputations worth hundreds of millions of dollars could be imperiled, perhaps even destroyed by a handful of leaked messages, ambiguous texts, and contradictory public statements. The studios would have no choice but to re-examine foundational practices, drafting more ironclad contracts, imposing tighter creative control,